One of the deadliest catastrophes in human history is the Holocaust, in which millions of European Jews were murdered by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. Persecution, torture, inhumanity, and death were the finest descriptors of the era. Stories of redemption and salvation were rare during this bleak time, yet they did occur. Oskar Schindler, a German entrepreneur, and Nicholas Winton, a young English banker, are two shining examples. The story of Chiune Sugihara, dubbed the Japanese Schindler, is less widely known, but is courageous. What's up, fellow curious minds? The awe-inspiring account of a man who defied all odds, surpassing the limits of nationality, religion, and expectations, a diplomatic wizard with a heart of gold, utilized his position to orchestrate a symphony of rescue missions. He fearlessly stretched the limits of diplomacy, pulling off miracles that seemed impossible in the darkest of times. Thousands of Jews owed their lives to his swift actions, granting them a chance to rise from the ashes like phoenixes. So hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you don't want to miss this incredible story. Sugihara was born on January 1st, 1900, in Japan. Sugihara's father had expected him to follow in his footsteps and become a doctor. He opted not to appear for the scheduled medical examination. It was a bold move that showed Sugihara was willing to risk his father's wrath to achieve what he thought was right. His character would remain unwavering throughout his life. Harbin, in northeastern China, was where Sugihara ended up after deciding to pursue a career in the foreign ministry. Sugihara learned the language well because half of the city's residents were of Russian ancestry. The Chinese Eastern Railway negotiations with the Soviets relied heavily on his superior linguistic abilities. After 16 years of duty, Sugihara left Harbin and returned to Japan because he disagreed with the way the Japanese military handled the natives. He met his future wife, Yukiko, there, and the two of them went on to have 4 kids. After a brief assignment in Helsinki, Sugihara and his family relocated to Kaunas in Lithuania. Sugihara was dispatched to the area in 1939 to set up a Japanese consulate. It seemed like a peculiar job posting at first. As of that point in time, the Sugihara family would be the only Japanese citizens on record. Schindler employed 1,200 Jews in his factories and bribed Nazi officials to look the other way, saving their lives. As a result, he prevented his Jewish employees from being sent to concentration camps where they would have almost certainly perished. 669 Jewish children were evacuated from Nazi-occupied Germany, Austria, Poland, and Czechoslovakia by Winton as part of the Kindertransport, Children's Transport Program, at the outbreak of World War II. In any case, Sugihara wasn't just observing Nazi Germany and the Soviets for the heck of it. He was there to report back to his superiors on what he found. Lithuania was a haven for spies throughout the better part of the first year of the war because it remained a free and independent country. Refugees from the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany found safety there as well. Kaunas had a shift in fortunes after the Soviet invasion of Lithuania on June 15, 1940. The consular building was home to Sugihara and his family, and one morning Sugihara opened his curtain windows to the outside world and was taken aback by what he saw. According to Sugihara's 1983 autobiography, the street that the bedroom window of the consulate faced was suddenly filled with the din and clamor of a large group of people. As time passed, that first group would expand to include more people. Most were Jews fleeing Nazism and the impending Soviet invasion of Poland, Lithuania, and elsewhere who had hoped to obtain a Japanese visa. Sugihara contacted his superiors in Japan to inquire as to his next course of action. They made it clear that no one would be issued a visa without the appropriate documentation. Needless to say, that disqualified the vast majority of the people waiting outside the Japanese consulate in Kaunas. Sugihara followed up with his Tokyo superiors twice in writing, but each time he got the same response. He then resolved to engage in yet another defiant deed. In his memoirs, Sugihara reflected on the response he received from Tokyo on his request for visas for an entire night. Perhaps it would have been in Japan's best interest if I hadn't issued them, But would that have been the case? After much deliberation, I decided to save the migrants out of a pure desire to do what's right and honorable in the eyes of God. There was nothing I could do if I was to be punished for this. As a human being, it was my moral obligation to do so. When aggression and inhumanity were excused as just following orders, Sugihara stood firm. Sugihara, moved by compassion for the Jewish refugees' situation, started granting transit visas to as many of them as he could. Many of the refugees would not have been eligible for transit visas because they could only be issued to those with valid visas to an onward destination. Still, Sugihara worked on transit permits for 20 hours a day until his fingers were calloused and his wrists to his shoulder hurt. He also worked out a deal with the Soviets that permitted refugees to go by train through the country and into Japan without incident. Sugihara was able to negotiate with Moscow and secure Stalin's promise that his refugees would be safe and allowed to enter the nation. Late in the month of August, it became clear that Lithuania would soon cease to exist as a sovereign nation, and Sugihara made the difficult decision to evacuate his family and close the consulate. Sugihara continued to issue transit visas until the very last minute, even as he waited on the station platform for the train that would transport him and his family to Berlin on September 4th. Sugihara issued a total of 2,139 visas. When it comes to the number of Jews, how many did Sugihara end up saving? Historians have estimated that between 6,000 and 10,000 lives were saved as a result of Sugihara's efforts, taking into account the fact that some persons may not have been able to use their visas and others may have carried numerous people on one visa. This suggests that between 40 and 100,000 people are descended from those who were granted a Sugihara visa in the past. The Japanese Schindler label fits him perfectly, and it's simple to see why. When asked why he did it, Sugihara explained, "It is the kind of sentiments anyone would have when he actually sees refugees face to face, begging with tears in their eyes. When he thinks about them, he feels nothing except compassion. Someday, I anticipated, someone would have a gripe with me." According to Hillel Levine, a sociologist who wrote a book about Sugihara, "I myself thought this would be the right thing to do." In the aftermath of Wutu, Sugihara and his family spent over a year as prisoners of war in Europe. In 1947, when they had been liberated and returned to Japan, his superiors fired him for his activities from the previous year. "You're aware of your actions. Now you need to leave the ministry," he was reportedly informed, as reported by his son Nobuki Sugihara in the 2019 edition of the Times of Israel. Sugihara had no idea how many people he had assisted because he had been able to keep a low profile for a long time. But in 1968, a visa recipient who had been following his case got in touch with him. Afterward, he traveled to Israel, where the official Holocaust memorial, Yad Vashem, posthumously awarded him the title of Righteous Among the Nations, an honor bestowed upon non-Jews who took heroic action to save Jews during the Holocaust. Evidence of a second Japanese Schindler, Saburo Nei, who assisted at least one Jewish refugee in obtaining travel permits in Vladivostok, was discovered last year by a freelance writer. Sadly, Nei passed away in 1992. One of the first families to obtain these priceless records was the Lewin family. The Lewins eventually made their way to New York City after escaping through Japan. After graduating from Harvard Law, Nathan Lewin worked his way up to become a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. To commemorate Sugihara before Holocaust Remembrance Day, he attended Monday's event hosted by B'nai B'rith International and the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. When asked about the advice of his rabbis, he said, "Do a good deed, not for the reward, but for the good deed itself." That's exactly what Chiune Sugihara did, he said. There is no way to know how many lives were saved beyond the record of 2,139 names Sugihara tardily submitted to Tokyo months after issuing visas. 10,000 people may have been saved, according to other researchers. After the war, Sugihara wrote an undated letter to a Polish academic in which he claimed that his visas may have helped 3,500 people. Sugihara's son responded, Nobody knows the actual numbers. One thing we can learn from this amazing tale is that true heroism has no limits. It is of no consequence where you are from or what others may assume of you. The point is to seize the day, fight for what you believe in, and change the world. Thank you, my amazing viewers. Together, we're uncovering the hidden gems of history, one incredible story at a time. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep making history. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge our perceptions and ignite our sense of humanity.